They told him to leave the house he built with his own hands. But instead of walking away, he stood up to the system and changed everything. David Johnson was 42 years old, a man who had carried the weight of responsibility since his teenage years. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark skin weathered by years of hard labor at an auto repair shop. His hands were rough and scarred, proof of endless hours fixing broken engines, lifting tires, and never backing away from hard work. His face carried quiet strength, but also the kind of tiredness that comes from a lifetime of fighting. Small battles no one else notices. David had lived in his modest brick house on the east side of Cleveland for nearly 15 years. The house itself was simple: 2 bedrooms, a small living room, and a porch where he often sat in the evenings with his daughter. But for him, it was more than a house. It was a promise he had kept to himself that his children would never grow up without a stable roof over their heads, the way he had. That morning was gray and rainy. David was fixing a squeaky cabinet hinge in the kitchen when a sudden, sharp knock rattled the front door. He wiped his hands on his work pants and opened it. 2 officials stood on the porch, holding clipboards and wearing stiff black suits that did not fit the neighborhood. One was middle-aged, balding, with glasses sliding down his nose. The other was younger, his face smooth but his tone sharp, like someone used to giving orders. Their umbrella dripped rainwater on the steps as they looked at David without warmth. "Mr. Johnson?" the older one asked flatly. "Yes," David replied cautiously. The younger official handed him a folded document. "We are from the Cleveland Housing Authority. This property has been selected for redevelopment. You have 30 days to vacate." The words struck David like a punch. He blinked, staring at the paper, trying to make sense of the letters. "What do you mean, vacate?" "This is my home. I've been paying taxes on this place for years. My children grew up here." The older official's face remained cold. "I'm afraid this area has been rezoned for a commercial project. Compensation will be provided if approved, but you must prepare to leave." And just like that, they turned away, walked down the steps, and disappeared into a black car parked by the curb. David stood frozen in the doorway, his breath uneven, the rain soaking the notice in his hand. He looked back into the house, the worn couch, the family photos on the wall, the laughter echoes of his children when they were younger. This was not just a house. This was his blood, his sweat, his legacy. But the paper said otherwise. That evening, David sat at the kitchen table with his daughter Maya. She was 17. Slim, with deep brown eyes that always seemed sharper than her age. She carried herself with quiet determination. Books were her constant companions: law books, history texts, essays she borrowed from the library. Her dream was to become a lawyer, to fight the very kind of injustices her father had lived through. She read the notice carefully, her brows knitting tighter with every line. "Dad, this isn't fair. They're pushing us out for money. They can't do this to you." David rubbed his tired eyes, leaning back in the chair. His voice was low. "Fair and legal are 2 different things, baby girl. I've seen this before. My grandfather lost his land back in Alabama when they built the highway. They promised him a better place, but he ended up with nothing. My uncle. They took his small shop in Detroit for some development project. He spent years fighting, but got nowhere. This is a cycle." Maya looked at him, fire in her eyes. "But we can fight it. You always told me that giving up is not an option. Didn't you say that if a man stands up once, others will find the courage to stand too?" Her words cut deep. David remembered the sacrifices he had made, the nights working double shifts, the mornings he went without breakfast so his kids could eat, the years it took him to finally buy this house. He had promised himself this place would be their foundation, their stability. And now someone wanted to erase all of that with a single notice. David stood and walked to the living room wall where a picture hung of his late wife, Angela. She had passed away 8 years ago after a long illness. Her smile in the photo still gave him strength. He whispered softly, almost as if speaking to her spirit. "They think they can take what we built, Angie, but not this time. Not without a fight." Turning back to Maya, he placed his hand on her shoulder. "You're right. We will fight. Even if it's me against the whole system." Maya's eyes filled with determination. "Then, let's start tonight. We'll read everything we can about housing law. If they think they can push us around, they picked the wrong family." Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. But inside, a storm had begun to rise, the storm of a man and his daughter preparing for the battle of their lives. The next few days were heavy with silence. David kept the notice pinned to the fridge with a magnet, almost like a scar he had to look at every day. It was a reminder that the clock was ticking. 30 days. 30 days before the only home he had ever truly owned would be gone. The neighbors soon found out. Word travels fast in tight communities. Mrs. Green, the elderly woman across the street, brought over a basket of cornbread and shook her head sadly. "Baby, I've been here longer than you. I've seen folks come and go. When the housing authority makes up its mind, it don't matter who you are. I hate to say it, but you might want to start packing." Her words cut deep, but David just forced a polite smile. "Thank you, ma'am. But I'm not giving up that easy." Some neighbors whispered their support. Others shook their heads. A few told him straight, "You can't fight City Hall, Dave." They got lawyers, they got money, they got power. But David knew in his bones that silence was a trap. If he accepted defeat now, what would he teach Maya? That justice only belonged to the rich, that the system always won, that black men should just bow their heads and move aside. No, he refused. That night, after Maya finished her homework, David drove her to the local library. It was a small, old building with flickering lights, but it carried the knowledge of decades. Together, they walked through aisles of dusty law books and city codes. David sat with a notebook, struggling through the complicated words, his rough hands underlining phrases he barely understood. Maya leaned over, her young voice steady. "This line right here. Dad, it says redevelopment projects must prove public benefit, not just profit. If they can't prove that, they can't evict us." David nodded slowly. "We need to show this ain't about the people. It's about money." For weeks, he spent his evenings like this, reading, highlighting, jotting down notes. He would later try to explain to Maya. His eyes often burned from exhaustion, after working all day at the auto shop. But he kept going. One night, his old friend Marcus stopped by. Marcus was David's childhood friend, a man with a rough past who had found steady work as a truck driver. He looked at the books spread across the table and sighed. "Dave, I love you like a brother. But this is too big. They're not going to let one man stop a whole project. They already decided." David looked up, his jaw tight. Then they picked the wrong man to mess with. One man with the truth is stronger than 10 men with lies. Marcus shook his head, but deep down, he admired his friend's courage. David's storm had begun to gather, and nothing could calm it now. Finding a lawyer was the next step. David didn't have much money, but he knew he couldn't fight this war alone. After searching, he met Sarah Lopez, a community lawyer in her 30s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for taking impossible cases. She wasn't tall, but she carried herself with a confidence that filled the room. She had brown hair tied neatly back, and her voice was firm but compassionate. Sarah listened carefully as David told his story. She tapped her pen on her notepad, her brows furrowed. Mr. Johnson, I won't lie. This is going to be a tough battle. They'll throw everything they can at us, but I've seen too many families get pushed out without a fight. I'll take your case. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. For the first time since the notice arrived, David felt a spark of hope. The first court hearing came quickly. David sat at a long wooden table beside Sarah, his rough hands folded nervously. Across the room sat a row of housing authority lawyers, dressed in polished suits, whispering confidently. The judge entered, an older man with silver hair and a stern face. The room went silent as the case was called. The housing authority lawyer spoke first. His words were smooth, rehearsed, full of technical language. Your Honor, this property has been lawfully marked for redevelopment. The city stands to benefit from new business, increased tax revenue, and modern housing. David clenched his fists. It all sounded so clean, so official. But he knew what it really meant, pushing out people like him, replacing families with profit. When it was their turn, Sarah stood. She was calm, but fierce. Your Honor, this case is not just about paperwork. It's about families, about lives. Mr. Johnson worked years to buy this home. He pays taxes, follows the law, contributes to his community. The housing authority is targeting his neighborhood without proving true. Public benefit. That is unlawful. Then she gestured for David to speak. He rose slowly, his knees shaky, his voice trembling at first. This house is more than bricks. It's where my kids grew up. It's where we built a life. You can't call it progress if it destroys families. The judge's expression gave nothing away. He simply nodded. We will continue this hearing at a later date. David sat down, his heart pounding. It was only the beginning, but he knew now the fight was real. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of David's life. Court hearings required paperwork, deadlines, and money. Sarah worked hard, but legal fees were still heavy. David's job at the auto shop began to suffer. He came in late after staying up all night reading legal documents. And sometimes he left early for court meetings. His boss, a kind but strict man named Mr. Peterson, warned him. Dave, I understand what you're going through, but I can't keep covering for you. Customers are complaining. You gotta choose the job or the case. David swallowed hard. He needed the job to pay bills. But if he let the case go, he would lose everything anyway. At night, when the house was quiet, doubt crept in like a shadow. He would sit on the porch, staring at the notice still pinned inside the house. Maybe they're right. Maybe I can't win, he whispered to himself. The weight grew heavier when a bill collector called, reminding him of missed payments. For a man who prided himself on always providing for his family, it felt like failure. But every time the darkness grew, Maya's light broke through. She spent hours in her room, reading law books, preparing arguments, even practicing courtroom speeches. One night, she came into the living room, holding a notebook. Dad, listen. If we can show that the redevelopment targets only black neighborhoods, we can prove discrimination. That changes everything. David looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. She was only 17, but her courage was bigger than most adults. He nodded slowly. You're right, Maya. This fight isn't just about me. It's about everyone they've ever pushed aside. The doubts never disappeared completely, but each time they tried to drown him, Maya's determination pulled him back. He realized the battle was no longer just his. It had become their battle, father and daughter, standing side by side against a system built to break them. The third hearing was different from the first two. By now, David had gotten used to the intimidating courtroom and the polished lawyers, who tried to bury him under technical language. He had also learned to sit tall, even when fear pressed down on his chest. Sarah had been working non-stop. Her office desk was stacked with files, reports, and copies of city records. One late night, she called David. "I found something," she said, her voice tense with excitement. "The Housing Authority's redevelopment plan. It's not random. They're targeting predominantly black neighborhoods. The area spared. Wealthier, mostly white communities, even though some of their houses are in worse condition than yours." David sat in silence, absorbing the weight of her words. His father once told him that history was a circle, repeating itself over and over, especially for black families. But maybe this time, he thought, someone had caught the circle in motion. At the hearing, Sarah presented the evidence calmly but firmly. She laid out maps, data charts, and neighborhood comparisons. "Your Honor," she said, "this is not redevelopment. This is discrimination hidden under the word progress. They're not rebuilding the city. They're erasing communities." The courtroom stirred. Even the judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the documents. The opposing lawyer tried to object, but his voice lacked the same confidence as before. For the first time, David felt like the wall of power standing against him had cracks in it. After the session, reporters gathered outside. Cameras flashed, microphones pushed forward. One young reporter asked, "Mr. Johnson, why are you fighting so hard when most people just walk away?" David looked straight into the lens, his deep voice steady. "Because this isn't just my fight. It's about every family who has ever felt powerless. If I can win, maybe they'll believe they can too. And maybe the system will think twice before erasing another home." The next morning, his words appeared in the newspaper. Suddenly, strangers recognized him at the grocery store. Some shook his hand, others patted his back, telling him to keep fighting. The storm he had started was spreading. But hope has a way of drawing enemies out of the shadows. One evening, David returned from work to find spray paint across his garage door in bold red letters, "Move out or else." His stomach twisted. He quickly glanced around the street, but the night was quiet, too quiet. Fear gripped him. Not for himself, but for Maya. He called the police. But the officer who arrived shrugged. "Probably some kids messing around. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about." David spent the night in the living room with a baseball bat across his knees, his ears sharp to every creak and rustle outside. His heart pounded at the thought of someone coming to hurt his daughter. The pressure grew unbearable. Bills piled higher. His boss warned him again at work. Stress carved new lines into his face. Marcus stopped by, looking concerned. "Dave, man, they're pushing you too far. This isn't just about a house anymore. It's about your safety. Maybe it's time to step back." David shook his head, his fists tight. "If I give up now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Fear won't move me. One belong here." Yet privately, he cracked. That night, sitting on the porch under the moonlight, he whispered, "God, I don't know how much longer I can fight. But don't let me fall before my daughter." Maya must have overheard, because she came and sat beside him. Her small hand slipped into his. "Dad, you're not fighting alone. You've got me. And Mom's watching from above. We'll get through this." Tears filled David's eyes, but he nodded. Her words were enough to carry him another day. Months of hearings led to the final showdown. The courtroom was packed that day. Neighbors, reporters, even strangers filled the benches. Everyone wanted to see how this battle would end. The Housing Authority's lawyers spoke first. Their words sharp, but they no longer sounded unbeatable. They pushed their argument of economic growth, of new opportunities, of progress. Then Sarah stood, calm, steady, like a soldier who had prepared for this very moment. She revealed documents showing that the Housing Authority had not only targeted, Black neighborhoods, but had also falsified reports to justify demolition. Gasps filled the room. The judge's face hardened. He slammed his gavel once. Order in the court. The opposing lawyer stammered, trying to recover, but the damage was done. The truth was out. Then it was David's turn. He stood slowly, his voice steady. "Your Honor, I am not asking for charity. I am asking for justice. A man should not lose his home because of greed disguised as progress. This house isn't just walls. It's where my wife and I raised our kids. It's where my daughter learned to walk. It's where we built a life. If you take this away, you're not building a city, you're destroying families. I fought not just for me, but for everyone who has been told they don't matter. We do matter, and we will not be erased." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge seemed moved. The battle had reached its peak. 2 weeks later, David sat in the courtroom once again, his hands trembling. The judge entered, his voice deep and commanding. After reviewing the evidence, this court rules in favor of Mr. David Johnson. The housing authority's actions were unlawful. The eviction order is null and void. For a moment, David couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air, unreal. Then they sank in. He had won. Maya hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. Supporters clapped and cheered. Reporters rushed forward. David closed his eyes, a wave of relief washing over him. For the first time in months, he felt free. But the reward was more than keeping his house. His story spread across Cleveland and beyond. Local news called him the man who refused to leave. Churches invited him to speak. Community groups asked him to share his journey. He became a symbol of resistance and hope. One day, standing on his porch, he looked at his old house, the peeling paint, the squeaky steps, the cracked window that still hadn't been fixed. To him, it was more beautiful than any mansion, because it was his, and because he had fought for it. Years later, the story did not end with David. It continued with Maya. She graduated law school with honors, inspired by the battle she had fought alongside her father. On the day she received her degree, David sat proudly in the audience, his heart swelling with pride. He remembered the nights she studied by dim light, the fiery determination in her teenage eyes, the way she had given him courage when his own hope faltered. When reporters asked David about the meaning of his fight, he spoke simply. "Never let anyone convince you that your voice does not matter. Home is not just walls and windows, it is dignity, it is history, it is life. Fight for it. Stand for it. Because when one man stands, he gives others the courage to do the same." And so, David Johnson became more than a homeowner. He became a symbol of hope for families across the city. His fight reminded everyone that justice is not given, it is demanded. With courage and persistence, the man who refused to leave had not only saved his house, he had built a legacy that no housing authority could ever destroy. Moral lesson of the story is that never surrender to injustice, no matter how powerful it seems. One person's courage can protect not only their home, but inspire an entire community to rise. Like and subscribe the channel for more interesting videos.